All right, what I thought we'd do now is just kind of take a look at the United States Supreme Court itself. Um, First of all, what you notice here is the building, and hopefully immediately you begin to think about the majestic nature of this building. It's built using limestone. Notice the columns here. There is carvings in the top, these statues. I mean, it's a very kind of imposing building, and I think it's meant to be that way to give the impression about the importance or the strength of law. So just something to keep in mind. Notice how small the people are in relation to the whole building. If you get a little closer, and we're going to get a little closer look up here, um, you'll notice here, so carved into the building, and gosh, I never can remember my art. Is it a frieze or a fresco? No, fresco is painted into a wall. A relief, maybe? I don't know. So, art historians, please let me know. But notice we have 9 justices carved in. Um, Denoting like that sort of Greek Roman look. You'll also see equal justice under the law. So as you enter in, there is this feeling that at least your voice is going to be heard. Um, when you enter, there's this huge hallway, and it's this big open kind of foyer. But notice here, so this is the door. We're looking at ceilings that are probably like 25, 30 feet high. And notice it's made of polished marble. And so, again, the idea here is they're trying to make the individual seem kind of insignificant under the law. As we enter the courtroom, you'll notice here that it's a huge courtroom. And in fact, when the court is in session, they never allow cameras inside. So all you get are recordings. Now they do let those kind of courtroom artists in there, and they'll provide images and supply them to the media. But generally, what you see is um, the Chief Justice sits in the middle, and then based upon your seniority, that's how close you get to sit. So the two most recent, which is Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan, they have to sit at the far end. But as justices retire, then you kind of move in. Um, the defendants and the plaintiffs, they sit up front. They generally get 30 minutes each to present their side, but really it's a shortened 30 minutes because often this is a time when justices will ask questions. And really what the justices are doing are trying to ask questions and to kind of clarify the petitioner's position, but really what they're trying to do is convince people who might be against them on the court of their side. They enter through three different, so these 3 justices on the left enter through here, these 3 on the right enter through here, and the 3 in the middle come through the center. Here's the conference room, and this is kind of where most of the work is actually done. And you'll notice here, this is an office that is right off the main office of the Chief Justice. The Chief Justice's job is the one who he assigns the writers of the opinions. Um, so it's kind of interesting when a decision is made, often it's made in here well before the case is actually argued in front of kind of the public. They may already have a preliminary vote, and so when they go and they meet in front of the public, they're there trying to convince each other of their differing opinions. It's kind of an interesting play. Um, but again, notice the ornate nature, these wood walls, these polished wood inset bookcases. When you go to the main reading room, which is kind of their library, the law library, again, notice, I mean, extremely well put together. Um, the intent being to again make someone feel insignificant under the law or beneath the law. So here are the current 9 justices of the Supreme Court, and if you look at it, probably one of the first things that you're going to notice is they don't necessarily represent society as a whole. Um, we only have 3 females. We only have 1 African American. We only have 1 Hispanic. Not or 8 of the 9 are Catholic. Um, so it's kind of a different group. Now, what's kind of interesting is as you look at these justices, they've all kind of joined the court at different times. The 2 oldest serving justices, which are Scalia and Kennedy, both were appointed under Ronald Reagan in the 1980s. Clarence Thomas was the next one. These 2 were Reagan. He was appointed under George Bush Sr. Um, she was appointed under, this is Justice Ginsburg. This is Justice Thomas. Justice Ginsburg was nominated under Clinton. She's actually currently the oldest member of the court at 84, 85, but just tenacious. Um, there's some really good uh, works out there on just how influential she is behind the scenes. Um, this is Justice Breyer. He actually was Clinton as well. Justice Alito and Justice Roberts were both under George Bush. And then Elena Kagan and Sotomayor were under Obama. So we have a wide range of philosophical viewpoints, generational viewpoints. The oldest being 80s and the youngest being mid 50s. So in my lifetime, I haven't had any Supreme Court justices. I'm 48. I haven't seen any Supreme Court justices in their 40s, but if we go back in history, of course, when people weren't living as long, there were quite a few. So this is the Chief Justice, John Roberts. Um, he's actually a really polarizing individual and figure. He was brought in under a conservative president, so a lot of conservatives tend to see him as he needs to kind of uphold the philosophy, but he's actually been one who has kind of moved to the liberal side a little bit on a few cases, most notably on um, on the same-sex marriage and what's the other one that I'm in the Affordable Care Act. So kind of interesting there. Swearing in ceremony looks a little, much like any swearing in ceremony. Here's President Ronald Reagan. Generally, you put your hand on the Bible, you raise your right hand, you're sworn in. Here's the former Chief Justice Rehnquist, who is reading the oath. So it's a very formal ceremony. A couple of trailblazers on the court, of course, is John Marshall. He's actually cousins with Thomas Jefferson, but he and Jefferson just battled. Um, they did not necessarily like each other very much, but one of the things, they both were trailblazers, throughout the history of the United States. And here's what's kind of interesting: whereas Thomas Jefferson really was only president for 8 years, notice John Marshall served 34 years. That's a long time. That's a long time to be able to influence, the direction of law and they tend to do it in a very kind of subtle way. It's not as very overt as like a decision a president would make. Another trailblazer would be Thurgood Marshall. 1967 to 91 is when he served. So you can see, 24 years is a long time. As mentioned earlier, Supreme Court justices either resign, retire, or die in office. But they tend to serve over multiple terms of presidents. He became very disillusioned down the end or down the stretch, and he actually resigned and mostly due to the fact that he was not agreeing with the way the court was moving. But Thurgood Marshall, the first African American appointed, he was lead plaintiff to all the important, or the lead lawyer, I should say, to all the important civil rights cases of the 50s and early 60s. Another trailblazer would be Sandra Day O'Connor, the first female to be appointed. She was appointed in 1981 under Ronald Reagan, and she served, again, much like all the other justices, very admirably. Has been very active in, um, a lot of the monumental decisions that have come down uh, during that time period. And you'll see, again, she served for 25 years. Ultimately, she had to resign due to the fact that her husband suffered from Alzheimer's and she needed to kind of take care of him. And those games that you play on iCivics, that's her organization that kind of puts those on. So she still has a role. Sonia Sotomayor, first Hispanic. She appointed under Barack Obama. She's a former prosecutor. She's from New York. She's kind of fiery. She was quiet kind of her first term, and then since then she has been one of the leading voices of the liberal side, um, really since 2010. And she's somebody who will play a very significant role, in the years to come. A couple of issues that were decided this year, and we're going to kind of look into a couple of them, but one of them is about unreasonable searches and seizures. Um, can a police officer that doesn't fully know the law, what happened in North Carolina was Hayen was driving a car with only one taillight. The police officer wrongly assumed that it was against the law to have a taillight out. And in some states it is, but in North Carolina you could still drive with one. He pulled him over and ultimately found illegal substances inside the car. And Hayen sued and said, the police officer didn't even know the law, so how could he pull me over and, conduct that search? Supreme Court heard that case. We see Alabama Democratic Conference versus Alabama. There's also another case about Arizona, and gerrymandering and what is the proper way to draw lines, district lines within a state. That was decided this term. Of course, we had the huge case of same-sex marriage. We had another one about the Affordable Care Act. Both of those were decided that, of course, same-sex marriage is now legal. Affordable Care Act is legal as well. There was also another case about lethal injection drugs, were the drugs they were using actually harmful to the prisoner that was being put to death. So anyway, so that just kind of gives you a quick look at the Supreme Court itself. And what we're going to do next is look at the Bill of Rights, look at the first 10 amendments.